We care about you enough to tell you the whole truth. You're a grown up. We're going to give you the advantage of discernment, and we're going to trust you until you give us a reason not to. And if you give us a reason not to trust you, that's a whole different conversation. But we're going to start on a place where you don't have to earn the ability to gain access to information. We're going to give it to you.
Welcome to Vibecast, the podcast that dives deep into the heartbeat of workplace culture. I'm your host, Christy Skutnik. Join me in conversations with extraordinary leaders as we unravel their experiences, both positive and negative, that have impacted workplace culture. This podcast is more than storytelling. It's about actionable insights. Are you ready to transform the vibe at your workplace? Let's go. Today, I got to do something different than I have done with other guests. I had the pleasure of speaking with Tiffany Sauder, the CEO of Element 3, and her Senior Vice President of Talent, Karen Seketa. It was so cool to hear Tiffany speak about her vision and Karen weigh in on how Element 3 operationalizes Tiffany's vision to make the organization thrive. Tiffany is all about figuring out how to build companies where people love to work, living, building, and teaching a life of and investing in people who are humble enough to learn and confident enough to believe they can win. Karen has led the charge to staff for sustainable growth at Element 3, with her specialty in mind of building and sustaining a rock-solid company culture. It is truly apparent the chemistry between Tiffany and Karen and why this duo has created such a vibe within the company. Listen in to hear more. Well, Tiffany and Karen, it's great to have you both here. This is my first time talking with two people and having a team on here, and I'm really excited about that because Tiffany, based on our conversations that we've had up to date, I think you just have such a great dynamic, it sounds like, and we're here to hear the journey of that. I can't wait to kind of dive in and see how you guys have done this together with your teams of building great vibes for your company. So as I start off with all the podcasts, I just would love to hear from each of you about how you define a vibe and what that really means to you.
Yeah, well, thanks for having us on, Christy. When you called and asked me if I'd be on your podcast to talk about the culture we've built at Element 3, I was like, well, I really can only talk about one half of it, which is really the what I wanted it to be. But the how is really Karen. She's really the architect of what we've built and the processes and infrastructure that I think are more transferable. So thanks for going on this journey with us and allowing Karen to come on as well. I think if I were to say what vibe means to me, I more feel this like sense of magnetism towards something. If I think about something that has a vibe, it's like this magnetic thing that you can't really describe, but you just want to go see and feel and experience more of. I think that's what the word vibe means to me.
Awesome. Karen, what about you?
Yeah, so you don't know this about us yet, but Tiffany and I are very opposite in our profiles and our personalities, and have learned how to create an interesting synergy with that. Instead of deflecting each other, we found it as an attraction. So you'll not be surprised to know that my view of vibes, where hers is an attraction to something, mine is vibes to me are something that deflect me away from certain situations. And so I think when I think of vibes, I think of not only the things you bring into the workplace to create the atmosphere and culture that you're looking for, but it's just as much about the things that you don't tolerate, and make it very clear that there are certain types of vibes that just simply won't be allowed. So
yeah, not all are good, right?
Yeah, right. And she automatically goes for the positive ones, and I automatically look for the negative ones.
For the undiscerning, it's all a good time.
Yeah. Hey, it takes two to tango. It takes two to tango, right?
Yeah.
Well, I'd love for you to just start us out talking about your journey. Tiffany, you mentioned it's like you knew what you wanted to do, but weren't sure how to do it, right? So if you could kind of take us back to the beginning of it all for you and how you and Karen got connected and then what that's looked like as you've built this company over time. 18 years, right?
Yeah. So, yep, I was just turned 25 when I started the business. And, you know, as I was starting to get my arms around the business and what we were going to be, and the company name is Element 3, we're a marketing agency. You're like, if you're around business, I have a finance background and really like was somewhat dismissive of the softer side of business, like these OBHR classes and stuff that I would take. I was like, I don't know, feels a little woo woo, but whatever. But when you get into business and you really start understanding the importance of people and attracting talent and like that, yeah, everybody wants to go somewhere where it's like fun and you're winning and you get to do cool things and the job is hard and you feel set up for success. Like you start to have, for me, I had a different appreciation of these constructive values and accountability. And as I started getting into business. And so I started to realize if we're going to scale as we were starting to grow, I was going to need somebody to manage the people side. It's a long story short. Karen was a client of ours, actually a fairly unhappy one. We had done pretty medium work for her. And she's very discerning and holds people really accountable and was pretty clear with us about that we'd done a pretty medium job. And I had to kind of admit we've done a kind of a medium job. But over the course of that, because of her honesty, her clarity, the kindness inside of that, we forged a relationship. I wouldn't even say friendship, but just a relationship. I was like, she's at least to be respected. She didn't turn me into ground meat. Everything she said was totally factual and true. And I have to be a big girl and accept that. So I think she maybe even fired us. But through that, we created a relationship. I wouldn't say friendship, but a relationship. And literally one night I was driving home. It was like midnight. And I was like, I'm supposed to hire, I have to hire Karen. That's what I have to do. I like went home, drove to our house, jumped on the bed like an idiot to my husband. I was like, I have to marry Karen. Not marry. I have to marry Karen. Yeah, I have to marry her. I practically married her. I have to hire Karen. That's what I have to do. And I couldn't sleep for like 3 days. We had lunch one day. I was like, Karen, this is the craziest thing. I know this is crazy, but you have to come work for me. And she thankfully was in a very financially stable place in her life. And so she could take a big bet on a overly excited entrepreneurial puppy dog that was me on the other side of the table. She probably even paid the bill. I don't know. And I was like, you just have to. It's going to be great. And I don't know how to do it. And I just know that you're the missing piece. I just know it. And I just said 1,000 words. And in her discernment, she just kind of sat there and was like, okay, let's do it. So I couldn't afford her full time, I don't think. Didn't you come part time for a while?
No, you ended up paying me more than you paid yourself.
Yeah, that's true. I did. That's
awesome.
right. I was like, I did. I paid her more than myself. I just knew. And, I don't know that I had the foresight to totally understand the role she would have in the organization. And I was such a young leader. This would be one of the things I would tell people is even though she worked for me, she mentored me from the background. There was like, I wasn't a puppet, but in a lot of ways, she was pulling the strings and helping me step into my potential as a leader, helping me know when the organization needed to hear from me, helping me know when to use my gifts to kind of create stability in a business that was growing really fast, that at times didn't know, kind of had bigger aspirations than capabilities. And I feel like this really was a guide for me too.
Gosh, that's a really important point, right? Because I think so many times, like an entrepreneur, business owner, CEO, leader of a company thinks that they need to know it all. And I think that's probably what gets in their way most of the time. And it sounds like you had enough in your gut to say, I don't know it all. I can't do it all. And I know people have gone before me. And so I'm open to learning, which is mature to say, because I think there's just I recently heard from my neighbor, like, your ego is not your amigo. And I think that CEOs and business leaders let that be their amigo, and it really doesn't serve them well. So that's awesome. And then Karen, you stepped into this role maybe on a hope and a prayer. I don't know. Like, it seems like there was some magic that happened in between. Tiffany, you had this feeling. What was that feeling? And then Karen, when she met with you, were you like, huh?
Yeah, it went exactly as she described it. And I think my response was, I just have two questions. How are you going to pay me? And what the hell am I going to do? You have like 6 people. And then she kept talking really fast and had it all figured out. And, I have this unusual attraction to very smart people. I mean, that's why I married the man I married. That was my instant attraction, was how smart he was. And I knew that about Tiffany, but she was a combination of extremely smart, but had a level of humility that she didn't think she was smarter than everybody else. And it just felt like a safe place for me. And I was in a place in my life, like she said, where I could take a chance. And I am not a risk taker ever. Tiffany's probably one of the only people in my life that has convinced me to take risks that I wouldn't normally take. And I thought, why not? I mean, what's the worst thing that could happen? I mean, I could find another job if I needed to. And my husband has a good job. And so we're good. Let's do this. And I'm glad I did. It was one of the best decisions that I've ever made. And I felt like I was coming in having had a lot of experiences in my past where I had screwed up everything I could possibly screw up in a very big way. I had been a 26-year-old leader of a very large company. And so I knew what it felt like to have that level of responsibility and how heavy that is to carry. And so I felt like I could at least bring that. And if nothing else, while not making everything perfect, I could actually like tell her, hey, this wall is coming up and I've seen it before and I kind of know how to get around it. And that's just what I do every day now. And I love it.
Like a navigator.
Because I can see, because I've done it. I've run into every single of those walls. And some of those walls I ran into more than once.
Totally. Okay. So talk to me now, Tiffany, about like the vision that you had. So you brought Karen on and you were like, okay, I know this is what I want. I just don't know how to do it. And maybe we can get into some of those details, right? About the walls that you did see, Karen, and how you guys either ran into them together or you scaled them or you walked around them. I'd just love to know some of the details there of how, you've been able to impact the organization based on the vision that you set out.
Yeah. And Karen sometimes has a more vivid memory than I do even around these things. But I have this insatiable desire for excellence that is like both a gift and sometimes a heavy burden for everybody to like have to say, okay. And so, I was 25 when I started the business. I really had never been in marketing. I'd never worked for a marketing agency. My background was finance, not marketing actually at all. And so I had spent the first 5 to 6 years, I would say, like kind of learning the business and the industry. What I came to find out, actually, after learning is like, actually, people kind of hate this industry, this advertising agency world. Most of the founders like built a business that's become a prison. The business kind of goes away once they retire. It's something like less than 10% see a meaningful financial transaction at the end of it. Employees generally are thought of as not loyal. And you work at an agency when you want to like work, get experience, add to your portfolio, grind really hard. But once you have a family and babies and responsibility and don't want to like have martini lunches and burritos at 3 a.m, then you go like get a real job because it's just sort of like Animal House 2.0. Like that was like sort of the vibe. And I was like, wow, this is wild. Like, this is wild. This is wild that these are the expectations that we kind of have like of ourselves as an industry. And I was like, that's crap. Like people create the outcomes that they believe in. So if you believe only young people are going to work for you, if you believe your people are not going to be loyal, if you believe it's going to be a sweatshop, if you believe you're not going to have a meaningful financial transaction at the end and that it's only going to operate so long as the principal is willing to work 80 hours a week, then that's exactly what you're going to create. If those are all the things that you believe, then that's what you're going to make. And so I was like, what if we just believe different things? What if we believe that we can create a place where the best creative talent can be continually challenged for an entire career here? What if we believe that we can build a new business and marketing muscle that generates revenue for the agency predictably without me having to be, at the front of the line every single time, schlepping around the city trying to get new business? What if we believe that we can have an exciting place for new, young talent to live and like, or to learn and like sit beside really sophisticated marketers. And we also have profound leadership opportunities for people once they get to mid-career. And what if we also can be a place where people retire? Like what if we believed all those things instead could be true? And so that was really the story that I was like, no, like the people in this industry deserve a more compelling vision than the one that we're putting out for ourselves. The people in this industry deserve to have business acumen alongside creative ability. Like the people, like we have to do better. And so that was sort of, I think, the place where it came from. I was just sort of pissed that everybody had agreed it could just be gross and bad. And that the principal at the end ended up poor and tired. And I was like, I don't think that has to be. This is a bad movie. It's a really bad movie. And I'm in it now. So, and that was kind of where I started to be like, we have to create a different vision for this. And Karen, how many people told us creative people are never going to be loyal? It doesn't matter. How many people told us marketing will never work for an agency? Like, how many people told us if you take Tiffany out of the sales process, you're never going to close a client? Like, referrals are the only way to grow this business. Like, we heard this stuff over and over and over again. It was like, it took us years sometimes to build some of this competency. You're never going to be able to compete with what in-house can pay and all this kind of stuff.
How did you go from finance to not being in marketing to opening a marketing agency?
I have a very wildly entrepreneurial father. And so I worked at Lilly in a great big company. Karen actually also started at Lilly. And I was like, man, I'm just not a big company girl. This is like moving so slow. I don't make any real choices for good reason. I was like 25 and didn't know anything. So I left Lilly. My dad had a bunch of different businesses. And I was like, why don't you buy a marketing agency? Because all these other businesses are going to need marketing, kind of like this. And so I convinced him to do that. He actually didn't end up using the agency at all. And I kind of like slowly got a vision for like, I think this thing can do something interesting. And it's 19 years ago, whereas right when email marketing was really becoming a thing, the internet was really becoming a thing in the way that we shop. So all of a sudden, a data mind was a very new and novel thing inside of marketing. So some of it was timing. Like I was coming at it as like an analyst. And for the first time, we had big chunks of data that you didn't just have if you were a big market research company. It was like you could just pull it down out of Google Analytics and, these really early email tools. And so I looked like a wizard because I knew like stats 101.
Totally. Okay. I was just curious about that. Now, Karen, Tiffany had this vision of and like changing the belief. And it's not just changing the belief in the few people that join you guys and so you could do an internal culture thing, but it was almost like changing the belief of the industry that it could be something different, right? So what were kind of the first things that you started to do in order to change that belief and build the culture?
Yeah, I think the best thing we ever did was ignore the way all the other marketing companies were doing things, the way they recruited and hired people and the way they ran their businesses. I mean, ignorance for us was truly our competitive advantage.
It's so true.
Because it allowed us to, in this bliss, to just create the culture we wanted from scratch. And there's a lot of power in that we didn't even know we were harnessing at that point in time. And my background, before I came to Tiffany, I had 17 years of experience in the staffing industry, which is one of the hardest industries to work in. And so if you can create a positive culture in a temporary staffing environment, you can kind of do anything. Like that is one of the hardest jobs there is out there.
That's a long time in temp staffing, 17 years.
It was a long time. And so I was able to sort of take some of the lessons that I had learned in building culture, which I had a very good staff of managers all over the country in that industry for a long time. And so I kind of took a lot of the things that I learned there, some of the things I learned while I was at Lilly, and was able to transplant them into what we were building at Element 3 without even having to worry about, does this fit within the framework of the industry or not? Like it didn't matter. And so some of the basic principles, starting with the most simple of create a culture of trust. And you can only do that through being extremely clear and transparent with the people that you surround yourself with. And if you can start there, that is not easy to do. And it's even harder to maintain as you grow. But if that is sort of like the stake in the ground for us, and then we build everything else around that, then it can work. And so that's where we started. We started from this place of truth and transparency and very clear expectations. I mean, you can ask 20 people that work with me now what my vibe is, and every single one of them would say it's no bullshit. Like I don't deal with bullshit. I don't deal with drama, and I definitely don't deal with assholes. And so if you can like make it really clear that that's how you operate and surround yourself with then it just works. So
I
Yeah.
think this word of trust can be glazed over, but I want to sort of punctuate this for the audience because I would say 100% of people who have chosen to work in an agency have been laid off. So they're coming to us from a place of being guarded and not feeling comfortable trusting us because they already kind of tried that. They went and worked for an agency, they trusted they were going to have a job, and then one day they got surprised that they didn't have one. And the other thing that happens, because most agencies are seeing these employment environments as like short term, you're going to be here 2 to 4 years. Well, when you go into a relationship expecting it to end soon, there's a certain way that you show up or invest or don't invest. Like there just is. There's a certain amount of information you don't care to share. There's a certain amount, like, and it just gets started off on this really strange place. And so when Karen talks about us needing to be consistent, us being transparent, us saying the truth, no matter if it was positive or negative, if you're going to like it or not like it, we were maniacal about that, still are maniacal about that. We did things like we do open book financials so that our employees knew when we had good months and when we had bad months so that they were not surprised by this sudden thing that could happen. I don't know, what else did we do, Karen? It was just like, we're just open with them. Like we would tell them bad news, or if we thought something was going to happen, we would let them know this is a possibility as a way of helping them understand we care about you enough to tell you the whole truth. You're a grown up. We're going to give you the advantage of discernment and we're going to trust you until you give us a reason not to. And if you give us a reason not to trust you, that's a whole different conversation. But we're going to start on a place where you don't have to earn the ability to gain access to information. We're going to give it to you.
So I'm certain that there's probably things that you do during your recruiting process and how you select people to join the organization to know that they have the maturity to be able to handle that level of information. So are there particulars that you guys do? What do you do in order to select the right people coming in the door? And it's not perfect, I'm sure. Nobody is, but I have to imagine there's a way that helps you guys be comfortable sharing that information with them as well, right? And they're not going to go take it and do something with it.
there are a couple fundamental things that I do in our process. And one of them is just respect the candidate from the very beginning, no matter what. Like, even if it's a candidate that I'm not going to hire. And, following up with them on a fast basis, so they're not sitting around wondering what's happening. If I turn somebody down and they ask me for more feedback, I'll take the time to give it to them. And so kind of establishing that groundwork of like, I'm respecting you, and I would assume that you're going to respect me back. And so the other thing is that because I've been hiring for so long, probably for longer than most of our staff have been alive, I can, within probably 15 seconds, get a read on somebody, and my BS monitor can go off real fast, and I'm right 99% of the time. And so that helps. So I can get that, I have a preference for in-person engagements with people, and so that I can read body language and very quickly establish kind of where we stand. And I always tell them in my process that one of the questions I ask 30 days in is, were there any surprises once they're hired? Because I want there to be none. And so I make sure that I pull people into the interview process, and I specifically tell them, I want you to tell them everything. I want you to tell them about your worst day. I want you to tell them about the things that go wrong. I tell them about the parts of our history that are really messy and the hard things we went through. And many, many times people will say to me that our interview process is very different from things they experience in other places, because we do sort of like open the kimono and go, here's all the bad stuff. So that when I get to the point of the 30-day check-in with new hires, most of the time their answer is, the only surprise is like how nice everybody is or how helpful people are in the environment. It's not bad stuff that they didn't expect.
So and have you experienced a situation where you ran your process and you were open and transparent, and then there wasn't like the mutual respect on the other side, right? So from the person coming into the organization, and they weren't, I don't want to say following, but weren't being their authentic self, and just created, one person can create such a vibe within an organization, either good or bad. Have you had an experience like that? And then how do you handle that?
Well, the only time that ever happened in its most extreme form was when years and years ago, when Tiffany hired someone and did not go through the process. And she did it on her own, and then she corrected her mistake very quickly. But no, like typically the only surprises we ever get on our end are ones that I've been working very hard in the last couple of years to try to figure out how to overcome. And that is that people have to have a certain level of critical thinking ability and grit. Like you got to have some real tenacity to work in this industry. That is so hard to measure in the interview process, but we're getting closer and figuring that out. And so the mistakes that we have made have been because of that. I can't say that there's anyone we've had to turn around and let go because they showed up as a totally different person than we expected them to be. And I would put up with that for about 90 seconds anyway.
Yeah, this is a no off days business. Like, they just can't have off days. It just like really. So there is this like stamina, even though it's not 80, 90 hours a week, there's a stamina intellectually that you have to love. And that's what we've had to get good at, being like people who are like, my brain is on even when I try to turn it off. It's like we have to have that kind of crazy.
So how do you you mentioned this belief of like that people can stay. So we talked a little bit about how you identify people coming into the organization, but what's the secret sauce inside that, people have the belief that they can build their career with you? And what do you do to engage them to stay? I mean, what does it look like for you?
Well, I can say, I think the role my job plays in that, and then Karen can speak to it more conceptually. You cannot say that you have a growth culture and have the person at the highest level of the organization not actively in the state of growth. It doesn't work. And so I think that I continue to put myself in new opportunities and things that stretch and grow me. And oftentimes that's pulling me out of the agency and being like, okay with creating space for the people behind me to step in and be able to grow and make those roles better and do it in ways that I didn't even know how to do it. And so I think that's the role I play, is moving the lid up. And I think oftentimes people give a lot of vocabulary to a growth culture, but aren't in an active state of growth themselves as a leader. So I think that's the thing I do, is make room for people. And I'm like the person in the wild with the machete. Like that's where I love. It's like, it's wild, it's unkept, it's not efficient. Like that's where I'm really good. But I think Karen has done a great job of we have a growth academy and like really some awesome infrastructure that allows us not to say, we promise if you stay here, cool things will happen in your life, but they're actively engaged in getting better as leaders, as communicators, as problem solvers, as client advocates, as all those kinds of, their toolbox is getting better here. So Karen can speak to that part.
Yeah, I'd love to hear more about that.
Well, so I'm very much a student of the stay interview. It's like it is my favorite interaction that we have with employees every year. And I read and study every single one of them to understand, because it asks the question of, why do you stay? And it also asks the question of, when was the last time you thought about leaving and why? And interestingly enough, in our company, 100% of the people that fill it out actually answer that question with a very specific point that they did think about leaving, because everybody does. It's just a natural part of what happens. And so I learn a lot from that. And I think that many people stay here because of the consistency and what they can expect of how leaders in our organization show up. And so half of my job is just spending time developing our leaders and training them so that no matter who you report to in our organization, you're going to get consistent messaging, consistent answers to questions, and the way that things are processed. And I think that goes hand in hand with what Tiffany said, because Tiffany and Kyler, our president, they are so laser focused on growth that it makes the rest of the organization feel like, people are looking out for us and they're looking ahead and they're visionaries. So they see way far out what's happening, and that's exciting. But at the same time, we're also not operating within chaos. Like, we have systems and processes in place that feel consistent. And I know, how people are going to show up. And then I think the only other part that I would say is, no one wants to get up every morning and immediately be stressed out about all the aspects of like work. Like the environment you're going to walk in has high tension. I have to wear these really uncomfortable clothes every day, and I've got to be there exactly in my seat at 8:00, or I'm going to get fired even though I don't have any reason to be there at 8. And so I think the culture we've established is all around the accountability factor of like, be crystal clear about what you expect of each individual in the organization. And it's different for every person. And if you're clear enough about that, then you need to just let go and let them do the work where, when, and how they need to get it done at the highest level of quality that you need. And don't manage all the stuff in between. And so, I always tell people there aren't a lot of rules around here about things because I don't want to enforce them. I'm not interested. I'd rather just hire grownups and say, this is the output I need from you. And that's it. And if you don't do that, then we'll have a conversation, but just go do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that. It's funny that you bring up like not being comfortable in something, right? Because I remember in my corporate days when I would go in and be like, I just want it to be Friday so I could wear jeans.
Yeah.
I'm most comfortable in jeans. I'll still wear a jacket. I'll still look cute and presentable and like professional, but I just want to be in a pair of jeans, and thinking Fridays were the best days, not because they were Friday, but because I was in a pair of jeans. And I always thought that was so funny, because I don't know if you guys saw when I was getting my dog out of here before we pressed record, but like, I've got a pair of slippers on because they're comfortable, right?
You do your best work in them.
Yeah, yeah. So I know it's a small point, but I think it's big for some, is like, just whether it's the clothes that you're wearing or the environment that you're in or the time of day, right? Not everybody is a morning person. And I'm sure some creatives that you work with get in their flow state in the middle of the night, perhaps. And so I love that idea of accountability and just allowing people. The hard part for leaders that I always see is that they have to then, talk to their people on a consistent basis, to know what's going on, to understand, and really work with them, where I think some leaders just are like, well, you didn't follow that policy, so therefore I'm writing you up. I always think that's so silly.
Well, I think there's a lot of hard work in establishing the outcomes that you need for each role. It has taken us years in some places to get, because if you want to be able to create freedom in how, you have to create insane specificity about what has to happen. And, there's a trust dance with your people when that's the case, when it's like, yeah, but we're also in the client service business. So your best time, like, it's this idea of like, yeah, if your best time is from 8 p.m. to 4 a.m, that's fine. But also if the client on the West Coast needs to meet with us at 8:30 in the morning, which would be the wrong direction, but it just has to it just has to happen. So yes, we certainly meet people where they are, but they are partners in the business. And so we have to have people who are willing to show up for the business sometimes. But we create a ton of flexibility in the person when we can. But the business is ultimately what we're serving. And when we do that, then we all win.
So what would you say if you had to pick like one thing that has been the most successful thing that you guys tried out, or just the thing that you look back on and you say to yourself, damn, that was awesome? I'm so glad we did that, right? Or we weren't quite sure if it was going to have this result, but it resulted in something beyond measure that you could have expected. What is that to create the vibe and the energy within your organization? What would that one thing be?
I would say a key inflection point for us was how we handled COVID. And we could have or should have been on the list of small businesses that didn't make it through. But for some reason, somehow, we just locked in and we made some decisions around how to handle that and how to manage it. We actually came out the other end much stronger than we went in, I believe. That was unexpected.
Is there a key thing that you could say you did or didn't do?
There were probably a couple things we did. We made some very hard decisions, but we were very honest and transparent about them as we were making them. Our leadership team, even though we weren't together anymore physically, we were very locked in with each other as far as like constantly communicating about how to navigate. I shifted into a mode of just like literally talking to people all day long, like connecting with our team on Zoom just to say how you doing. Like that was like most of my job during COVID is what I did. And I think just doing our very best to make people feel safe and taken care of. And we didn't respond in a way that was we didn't panic. Everyone was making all these decisions of like just doing these things that they thought they needed to do because everyone else was doing them. We didn't do that.
Well, that's consistent with how you guys started out the conversation today, right? Is like believing that you could do it differently than what other people have done. It sounds like that's just like in the fabric of who you are and how you operate.
I think we also talked to our team before we knew the answers so that they felt not like they weren't informing our processing, but we didn't go away. I think we did calls as a leadership team 3 mornings a week. And then I think every Friday we talked to our team and just said like, this is what we know. This is what's decided. We're making a decision with the best information we have available right now. And we're just very honest and certain, not in a way that was like, this is the best. It's just, this is the choice we're making with the information we have available. And we will continue to walk through this together. Yeah. Mine actually is open book financials. I think that sets a real tone for what we mean by transparency and vulnerability inside of an industry that tends to be very obfuscated and with a employee base that does not tend to have a really high financial acumen. And so it can sometimes be used as like, well, you don't really understand. And it's like, oh my word, these people are so smart. Yes, they were not taught accounting terms in college, but they can learn it. And so when I think we make that accessible, it makes them more powerful in their jobs to understand you decided to do art for commerce. Like it's what you decided is to do marketing for businesses who are in a for-profit environment. And so I think we use our business as a sandbox for them to learn the pressures of their clients. I think it gives them more just power in their own careers and understanding the world that they operate in. And I think it gives them an idea of the real financial impact that they're having in their job day to day.
Yeah, you always hear companies, or I do certainly in my consulting world, that like they want to hire people with business acumen, but then they're not doing anything about it. Right? Or they believe they are doing something about it by giving them like, communication classes or bringing them into like an executive meeting or something like that. But the financials are so, so, so important because every business decision has a financial impact, good or bad. And so if you don't understand like how those two translate together, building business acumen is really hard to do. Was that uncomfortable for you at first? Was that something where you were like, I don't know if I should, or has it always been in your nature?
I'm very vulnerable and I like information. So I'm like, I don't know why I treat people differently than what I want. Like that feels weird. I think there's a lot of people who make it scary. Like, your employees are going to think that all that money is going into your pocket every month. People are going to use that information against you. Like your financials are going to end up on the internet somewhere. It's like, okay, I mean, I don't know, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I guess we'll deal with that then. There's this quote that says, well-meaning people given the same set of information will come to the same decision and conclusion, even if they individually lose in that scenario. And that made sense to me. I'm like, if I give people the information, if we need to let 6 people go because we're losing $80,000 a month, that's probably the choice everybody in the room would make too. And again, if you just tell them why, it's not like we're being like erratic or greedy or crazy. Every business decision is made because there's a financial reason behind it. And we believe it's the best choice for the long-term interest of the business. And I think going into COVID, when people had seen us for years give a monthly overview of our financial results and say, this is how we're investing in the business for the long-term success of the organization, the growth, our continued careers and impact in the world, they like believed it when we needed to make salary cuts. And when we like, it was like, this is the best decision for the long-term interest of the business. It was not a new moment in time to see us make choices. And sometimes when we make interest in the best interest in the long-term interest of the business, best choices in the long, it means they get money. Doesn't always mean that they lose. And I think they've seen cycles of us winning and them getting a financial result of that. And there's times when we're figuring things out and everybody has to give a little in that scenario. So I think that they believe us when we say that.
Yeah, I think we tested it probably most particularly last year when we did not pay out bonuses at the end of the year, which was a very hard thing to do because we had for the last several years prior. And then we did our employee net promoter score survey literally right after that. And we got our highest score ever, which that doesn't make any sense if you think about it. Like you think people would be unhappy because they didn't get their bonus, but it was because they understood and they weren't confused about the decisions that we had made.
Yeah. Wow. That really says something.
Karen, say what our net promoter score is. It's amazing.
What was it? 89? I haven't looked at it lately. We're getting ready to send it out again.
I thought it was in the 90s.
Yeah, it may have been. We had only one. Everyone was 9 and 10, except for one person was a neutral. So
wow. And how long have you guys been doing Net Promoter Score?
Oh gosh, several years. We've got several years of data on it.
That's awesome. So my last question is there anything you're seeing within your team, organization, environment? Like what does the future hold? And what trends are you seeing that you guys are trying out or working through, or feedback that you've been given from your employees that is different than what you've done in the past that you feel will bring you into the future?
I think a new muscle that we have to develop as leaders in this environment today is the speed at which AI is changing everybody's job. We need to make sure that we're culturally creating an environment where innovation is seen as a friend of where we're going and not as a friction point of like taking jobs or whatever that looks like. So I think we've done a good job of that, but I think we have to just continue. The speed of disruption is just increasing. And there's this comfort in like knowing how to do your job that comes for each of us. But our ability to be able to have this like innovation and learning agility and this not being protective of the things we know, the things we do, and just trusting our ability to go into environments and solve well. I think that really is our superpower as a company. I just see that as a big piece of the talent that is going to, in cultures and companies that are going to do so well in what I see as the next 5 to 7 years, and those that are just like, I think are going to struggle. So that's what I would point to.
Yeah. I would say we have to double down on our commitment to accountability and clarity about the outcomes that we're looking for from every person in the organization. And while we do it pretty well, there's a lot of room for improvement for us because like Tiffany said, that's a hard thing to do, to like be so clear about what you need from each person, especially when it's evolving and changing. We have to be recommunicating that and clarifying it because, in the absence of very clear information, people tell their own story and it's always wrong. And then you get into the drama, and then you have to like roll it all back and figure it out. So we have to stay ahead of that.
Yeah, that absence of information thing is real. And everybody needs a different level of detail to be clear.
That's the whole podcast. I need a shot glass of information on anything to feel like I am full on mastery level. I could write a book on this. And Karen is like, what? I'm like, oh my word, we know so much. And she's like, no, we don't. I was like, oh, but we do. But we do.
And that's why you guys are a great team, right? Because Natalie, who's on my team, is super high detail, and I'm like you, Tiffany, super low detail. Like, I got an F and she'll ask me all these questions. I'm like, I'm going to have to go back to the client. Like, I actually don't know. I can make some assumptions about like, based on like the context and these people and this and that, but like, this is like the vision of it. And she's like, but I'm like, it's fine. Yeah.
No idea. Never thought of it.
I'm actually married to a high detail person too, which is super helpful.
Yeah, it's the line is always, "Don't worry, it'll be fine." And there are times when I have to go, "Okay, Karen, you just have to trust Tiffany on this one. It's going to be fine." And there are other times where I have to be like, "No, it's not. Like, you have to listen to me."
It's true.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, it sounds like you know when and where to do that. So
yeah, I figured that out.
Awesome. Well, any last parting comments? Is there anything you'd like to share with listeners if like they could just go do one thing today? What's that one thing they should just start doing?
I would say stop with the bullshit. Just be clear and tell people how it's going to be. Treat them like the smart humans that they are and give them the information that they need to understand what's happening. Stop dancing around things.
I would have said the very same thing, slightly different words. I said, I thought the truth will set you free. Your people want to be partners with you in solving, and sometimes a well-framed problem is what you need to bring to your people, not always just the answer. And I think I had to learn that there's a lot of smart ideas and wisdom inside of the organization, and it's not my job to have to fix everything.
That was a much better way of saying stop with the bullshit.
No, I think it's like different, a little different.
Those were better words.
Well, thank you guys both so much. This was so fun to have two people that work together so closely with, you know, same but different perspectives and how you're doing things. So I really appreciate you taking the time, the energy, the thought to put into this today. So appreciate it.
Thanks for having us on, Christy.
It was fun.
Tiffany's definition of a vibe as magnetic attraction towards something and her emphasis of the importance of both positive and negative vibes in the workplace is really intriguing. It was so awesome to hear Tiffany share her journey of starting the business and realizing the importance of creating a vibe, and then finding and hiring Karen likely earlier than many organizations of her size would typically do. It's so refreshing to hear the vision Tiffany had for the company and her desire to change the narrative of the advertising agency industry. I admire how Karen explained how their opposite personalities complement each other and how they have created a unique synergy. It's important to note that a vibe starts the minute someone learns about your organization. Tiffany and Karen highlighted this during our discussion about their hiring process and the importance of selecting people who have the maturity and tenacity to thrive in their industry. They emphasize the need for continuous growth and development and the role they play in creating opportunities for their employees to grow. One big piece that stood out to me was also the significance of open book financials and how it fosters transparency and empowers their employees. If you heard nothing more than their advice to each of you, it is to be clear, honest, and treat employees as partners in problem solving. Now get out there and start vibing. If this episode inspired you and you want to see how you can take the next step to creating a better vibe within your organization, I'd love for you to download our complimentary 75 Vibes worksheet. This is a simple tool to create a habit and mindset around creating great vibes in work and life. The best part, it's simple and it works.